So there's an underestimation of the amount of volume that you need to do in order to get a client.
Yes.
And then there's like an overestimation, like the number of clients that you need in order to like see results.
Yes. I would have just focused on selling. I think I spent too much time like trying to be like, which platform do I use? Do I use Zapier? Do I use Make? Which automation? I realized pretty quickly that I learned the most on the job, and to take those jobs that are just above my skill level.
I'm looking for like that future eventual client relationship where I can like, throw down a game of League with one of my clients or something. I feel like that's an awesome goal to shoot for.
That's a good goal to have.
Yeah. We'll do our client calls over League of Legends.
That's when you know you've made it, Nick.
Let's say 100 people say yes to your thing and want to do a call. Like 30 of them will just be like, hey, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. Like another 30% of them are kind of like, screw you. I'm never ever doing this. And it's pathetic that you would even reach out to me. So go die. And then there's like that like middle 30 or 40%. I would much rather speak to the needs of that first 30%, the people that say yes, than try and work my way pushing people that are no's or pushing people that are kind of in the middle towards me, if that makes sense. Because you can just solve it through volume, right?
One last thing that I will tell people who are out there listening about the part-time thing is that like, use your job as your superpower. Not having to have that urgency to like put food on the table is going to be part of the process of getting success if you want to do it part-time. But also understand that the business model is going to be very different than scaling something if you're going all in.
I had somebody threaten to sue me for...
Yeah, so I come from a hospitality background, primarily food and beverage. I worked in the nonprofit world, and I founded and ran a charity organization for several years. And when I was doing that during the pandemic, it was almost impossible to find people to work. It's during the pandemic, everything's shut down. So I really had to try to find ways to amplify my impact as a solo founder, for things like data entry, email follow-up, donor outreach. And so that's when I first experienced automation. Eventually, I started gravitating towards more of the tech world and started moving away from the nonprofit. And that's when I came across your video tutorials. And I watched a ton of those. At the time, though, I don't think you had any communities going on or mentorship, any form of mentorship. So I had joined a couple of other kind of coaching programs that they just weren't super well organized. I think I overpaid for not the best result. The community aspect was underdeveloped. And so I started, I kept networking, kept taking on small jobs like with family members, friends of family, but it was very spotty, so I was still doing, other work in consulting, business operations for bars and restaurants and stuff like that. And then eventually I saw that you had opened up your school community. I was like, oh, perfect. Like I already know this guy's content is going to be good. There's no like guessing.
Cool. So that was the journey to get to, I guess, Maker School specifically.
Yeah.
And when you were saying you were doing some consulting before, like what sorts of consulting relationships were you having? You said bars and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So primarily, from my hospitality background, I was a bartender for many years. And so I would go in, and if a new bar or restaurant was like, hey, we want to open up a bar program, I would come in, consult them on like, okay, here's how you set up your bar program. This is how you deal with distribution. This is how we're going to do basic marketing. But I had to kind of step away from that area just because brick and mortar never really worked that great with automation. And I tried doing certain, outreach when people come in and scan a QR code, but it's just not the same. You can't hit the volume.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's like square peg in a round hole. I did the same, eh?
Yeah.
I was operating a video marketing agency right around COVID. And so a lot of our clients were like local, and I was implementing automations and stuff, and it was working okay for some things, obviously like emails and whatnot. But yeah, COVID hit, shut us down. And I was like, okay, I don't think the local play is the angle anymore. I got to find something else.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Did you have any major financial goals when you were just getting into this stuff? Were you just like, I'm paying my bills?
Yeah. To be honest, for me, I just wanted to make something online. I think that like for the longest time, I sort of had this, I don't know what it was. It was like this invisible wall with making money online. And it was probably a combination of like just not sticking with one online side hustle long enough, or struggling to like ask people to pay me what my time was actually worth. Or, just my time being spent elsewhere that I didn't follow through. But like, I consider myself to be a pretty capable business mind. But I've always been better at doing business in person, just, bartender, or just like talking to donors or, whatever. but online money sort of just escaped me. I don't know what it was. Um, so my my mantra starting out was just like I want to break that invisible wall, like whatever that is. As things have evolved, I think now my long term goal is I want to hit 500K a year, in combination with salary or however that looks. That's kind of my long term goal. So I still have a ways to go, but I think it's good to have your eyes on set goals.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think there's like, different types of set goals. A lot of people I think make this grand declaration when they just get into business. They want to make like $10 million a year or whatever. But, I find that the steps required to make large amounts of money like that tend to be different from the steps required to make smaller amounts of money, which you need to do in order to
Yeah,
get there. So
yeah,
I feel, I think 500K a year is like really reasonable. I think one of the things that was really interesting about you was you were saying that you were making $11,000 a month part-time. So, describe part-time for me. Like, run me through exactly what that looks like.
I do hesitate to use MRR just with the part-time model. I mean, I think that people kind of looking from the outside in, like a lot of the work that I do, it does not fall into a retainer model anymore, just because I do have to have kind of the freedom for things to fluctuate. So for example, like last month when I just relocated to San Jose for a new role at my full-time job. And I recently got engaged, so I'm planning a wedding. And
Congrats.
so it's like I have to have that freedom to like fluctuate.
Mm.
July was, close to like 5K. The month before that was like 11K. This month, MRR will probably be around 15K. And so I'm able to project those and feel pretty consistent just because of the systems that have like the maturity of the systems in place. Um, but for the most part, I don't do a ton of monthly recurring unless I like have outsourced like specific people to be like, hey, you're going to be doing this and you're going to maintain it. But the way that it looks like is I do outsource a lot. So I would say that my business model is probably pretty different than a lot of the stuff that you push on your community, and I would not recommend people emulate me unless they are prepared to grow very slowly. I was able to have the luxury of scaling a little bit slower because I did have my job to pay for food and stuff like that. And so things like I didn't have to niche down super quickly. I'm still able to kind of take those bespoke custom automations, which is terrible for like scaling quickly. But yeah, so what it looks like a lot is I spend most of my time on sales and lead gen. I found that if you can close a contract, there is no shortage of people who can build it for you.
Yeah, very true.
Uh,
Yeah, like the supply side of the people that are willing to do work versus, the number of contracts out there. Very skewed. That's cool, man. Wow, really sweet. Just out of curiosity, what are you doing in your full-time job then? You don't have to name the company or whatever.
I work in tech. I am a technical account manager. So there's some overlap. It's enterprise level. I do a lot with data analytics, marketing, automation, marketing tech. The reason why I'm able to kind of have both of these worlds is because they don't really compete with each other.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, one's probably more
Yeah.
SMB focused, and then your
Yeah.
other's enterprise focused. So you get to speak the enterprise language, but you don't necessarily step on your own
Yeah.
toes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's part of the reason why I am sticking with and kind of prioritizing like the full time is that, my goal is to stay in this industry in one capacity or the other, like long term. And maybe in the future, I'll get to a point where like I feel like, hey, I've gotten enough experience in this enterprise world that now I've got like that really good social proof. I've got that experience that other people don't have. And now I'm like ready to go all in on whatever that looks like. But for now, like I'm kind of pacing myself. I think that we're still early on in the industry. I think a lot of people are kind of rushing. They're rushing themselves to be like, I need to learn all of these things. New things are coming out every day. And my recommendation is like, there's no way you're going to keep up with everything. So might as well just pace yourself
Yeah, there's like
because
10 model drops a day, man. Like what the,
a day
no way I
is
can keep
insane.
track of them. And they're all such interesting names. And no, it's just, yeah, it's like studying for your freaking medical board exams or something, man. Um,
Yeah.
In terms of the actual, okay, it's cool. So now I understand, you got like the full-time and then you're supplementing it with part-time. It sounds like the vast majority of the part-time ones are, they're either one-time projects or they're follow-up projects for clients, but they're not like on a recurring basis. And then you're working in SMB in your agency and then mostly enterprise in your like day-to-day.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the actual, I guess, strategy that you followed then. So first time that you like jumped into maker school, and you started doing like the day by day steps. I know you're talking about how you're outsourcing and how you're basically you're running an agency. You're not doing the freelancing route, which is what I usually recommend. But like walk me through like first client. How did you get them? What sort of approaches did you take to land that and break that internal glass ceiling for yourself?
Yeah. So one thing that I will preface is that I did do the freelancing side of things starting out. Like I think you have
Yeah.
to. I think that you have to get some experience like on the ground and like get your hands dirty of like solo freelancing, what that looks like. So Upwork was, where I started off. Upwork I think is great place to get a little bit of like the market research of like what are people paying? Like how do you interact with clients? What kind of clients do I like working with? So I did all that. And so I think like my early jobs were following your program pretty to the T. That was kind of what got me to a place where I felt comfortable enough vetting and outsourcing other people to do it. I think that you have to know how to do it before you can be like, hey, this person is going to be able to do it for you. My first jobs were the typical like reaching out via cold email. I know on my post that I talked about like having struggling with cold email, and a
Hmm.
lot of people saw that post and kind of were like, "Oh, so how do you do this without cold email?" I'm like, "Don't get it twisted. Like, you still need to do cold email. Like, that's still a must have." My strategy starting off was to just work extra hard. So it's like wake up early, do the sales in the morning, go to work, come back from work, fulfill if I can, and then start getting better at like how to balance your time. And I think the biggest change for me, and I think the biggest point of growth was that understanding like what level of access I should give people
Mm.
to me. I think my background in hospitality, my nature is to be like, I need to give them 100% of myself all the time. And that's just not conducive to running any sort of
Yeah,
business,
definitely.
like especially when you start scaling. And so it's just I had to use strategies like let's set up a Slack channel so that like I can respond to certain things. They feel like I'm going to get to it, but they don't have full access to like, hey, we're going to set up a meeting, or like, hey, Jake, like this broke. I need you to get on a call right now. And so that was a big shift in my strategy once I started
Yeah,
scaling.
that's really cool to hear because I think like productizing the comms is a really big chunk of successful agencies
Yeah.
simply because client expectations are all over the freaking place. And you can productize the deliverable, but if you only do that, you're only really getting halfway there. Actually templating out like when you're communicating with clients, what you're communicating about, clear defined expectations like time windows, how long it'll take for you to get back to them Monday to Friday. Like, dude, I can't tell you how many people they don't even understand the product side or how to like fulfill an automation, but then they get that down and then they easily scale to 20, 25 grand just because that ends up being the big sink, right? Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
you attended. I had a call last week where somebody asked me a question basically about this. They were on full time for the most part. One of the client contracts they got for like I think it was $7,000 or $8,000 a month or something ended up kind of growing and bloating into more than the initial scope. And so they went from getting this client on, which they thought would just be one of multiple in their roster, to basically being like full time for this person for 7 or 8 grand a month. And I was like, where's
Yeah.
all your time going? Then they kind of ran through and then they like told me. And the vast majority of the time it was like a hour and a half, 2 hour long call every single morning that they needed to be on, plus random voice huddles. And it's like, dude, you can't do that if you really want to like scale a successful
Yeah.
business. So I can totally see the two wolves within you, hospitality Jake, and then you being like boundary Jake, constantly tugging.
Yeah.
I imagine that was probably pretty tough to make it through.
It's still tough. It's something that like there are times where I'll break the rule, and there are times where like, and luckily because of the business model that I have where my priority isn't necessarily like growing really quickly, I think I am able to sometimes like go above and beyond and be like, hey, I'm going to spend a couple extra hours to fulfill this
Mm.
in a way that like, might be a little bit out of scope, which I try to tell myself don't do that. But it's part of it. And I think that what I found is that if you're able to work with the same client over time, I think that their expectations, it becomes a little bit easier because they know that when you say like, okay, it's going to be 48 hours to 72 hours, they know that like, okay, that's actually going to happen. And so they give you a little bit of space to be like, okay, this person is going to follow through with what they said. So I don't need to like keep checking in on them.
Yeah, for sure,
Uh,
for sure. I mean, that's why I always pitch like retained relationships, recurring relationships, follow up relationships. A couple of
yeah,
reasons, obviously. The first being for the benefit of people that don't know. On our follow up engagement, you don't have the cost per acquisition, so you don't have to spend that customer acquisition cost on whatever it is. If it's Upwork, it's Connects. If it's cold email, it's like your time and the money you're spending on the lead
yeah,
enrichment. But then too, you get to know the business, and so you get to be able to like, vibe out the client. They get to understand what is reasonable for you to fulfill in a reasonable amount of time, and they just like lose a lot of that friction. I bet you, and I haven't plotted this, but maybe I should. But like average time spent per client per project over time, probably just so your internal hourly rate goes. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like 15 grand a month, like I think it's achievable for most people, but I think if they don't understand that, then they'd be running themselves ragged, and they certainly wouldn't be able to do it part time as you are.
Yeah, it's tough. I do get a lot of, because I try to stay networking with a lot of people in the community. And I do get a lot of people reaching out, and I'm always very upfront about like, hey, like this didn't happen within the 90 days or like however long you're going to be, doing the community. Like I was trying to do some form of consulting with automation, maybe not fully automation, for years. It's like I had to build up slowly to get there. And the luxury of having a full-time job was what allowed me to get there, because some months are going to be really slow and some of them are going to be a lot better. But I think that when you start getting in your reps, you start to realize that it's kind of inevitable. Like once you start getting in the reps, you start to realize like it's going to be pretty hard not to have success. And that's what was different about this quote unquote side hustle for me, was that like, hey, I started to see like, just put in the reps, you're going to start seeing results. And I think that's hard for people to see coming into it. That like, just keep applying to Upwork, keep doing cold email. Like eventually you're gonna get people to respond.
Yeah, for sure. That's really the problem to solve, I would say. I've always considered it like once you solve the problem of lead gen, you sort of just fall forward. And you may fall
Yeah.
quite a lot, but you will be falling forward. And eventually you carve out
Yeah.
that path. You ever play like, I don't know, Pokemon way back in the day when you enter like a little dungeon or a little cave and like your guy doesn't have the skill?
And then you,
Yeah. You know
yeah,
exactly what I mean, right? So you can't actually see
yeah,
anything. You basically
yeah,
are just constantly doing that, one client at a time, one engagement at a time,
yeah.
until looking back, you've carved out the entire thing and you're like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, so many video games. I think that applies to StarCraft, Fog of War. You play video games?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite one?
I'm not a huge gamer these days in terms of like time. But yeah, I grew up playing video games, and occasionally I'll hop on a Switch or something
Yeah,
like
hell
that and
yeah,
play a
man.
little
That's
bit.
what I'm talking about. I'm looking for like that future eventual client relationship where I can like, throw down a game of League with one of my clients or something. I feel like that's an awesome
That's
goal to shoot for.
that's a good goal to have.
Yeah.
That's funny.
We'll do our client calls over League of Legends.
That's when you know you've made it, Nick.
Okay, cool, man. So then, like, as you scaled, because you did scale, how did your approach change exactly? Like, I know you started with Upwork, and then you dove in and did some cold emails. Did you find a lot of referrals come in, or like, what was the main strat?
Yeah, so referrals was a big one. I started prioritizing other channels of acquisition. So at the beginning, Upwork and cold email were my main ones. And like I mentioned in that post on the community, like cold email still is one that just doesn't resonate with me a
Mm.
ton. I know that it is essential, I think, and I hesitate to like push people away from it. But just for me personally, I think that it's hard for me to stomach almost just like the idea that I'm putting out like all of this. And so, I mean, that also kind of comes through with like how I try to frame my copy, is like I really try to put thought into it so that it doesn't feel disingenuous. I think that I got better at making executive decisions. I got better at saying no. I think my mindset towards lead gen and sales changed. So this was the first time that I ever really experienced what high volume meant.
Mm.
Even doing like the Upwork, when I was kind of slapped in the face when I joined your program, and like I realized like how many applications I needed to get out. And so, in terms of like streamlining those types of workflows, those manual workflows of like, you got to apply to a bunch of these places and you got to record the Loom videos, that was kind of new to me. But then cold email was even more new to me, that now we're talking about thousands of, points of outreach. And so my mindset towards that changed in the sense that like I started to have this mantra of like it's better to race to a no than get stuck at a slow maybe.
Mm.
And so what before when I would get these like, oh yeah, like that sounds good, but like I don't know. Like at the beginning I was like, I need to work this lead. I really need to like, change my offer or I need to reduce and give them a discount. And that just it doesn't work. Or I found for the most part, it's just not worth my time. And so now, eventually it became like okay, unless they are fully on board, um, I'm not going to spend that much time on them. And I learned that most people who are ready to do this, like, like you can tell that they're like ready to make that decision. And before I was just like, oh, I need to like latch onto this lead because they're giving me some inkling of, positive feedback. And then they, they'll shake your hand and then they'll ghost you at the invoice. And then I just wasted the whole day, doing like this proposal for them when it was very clear that they were, not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, how much more could you have reached out to in the time it would have taken to try and nurture that one lead?
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like that's the hardest thing in sales is just to know like when to stop pushing specifically towards something. I come from sort of I want to say like high urgency, high ticket closing background where, we force people to make the decision right there on the spot. So we were going door to door and hitting 50 to 80 businesses a day. And, we convert maybe, I want to say like 8% of those into meetings. But the whole goal of that meeting was I came with a little paper contract. I walk into their office and I'm like, one way or another, I'm going to get a yes or a no. So like the degree to which you had to push people that were like, maybe in a good place to make a decision, but also maybe not. Never really, I don't know, it just never really like felt right to me, like how that sat in my mouth. I would get people that were like, oh yeah, maybe we'll do this next week. It's like, no, you need to make that decision now. You have all the information you need, yes or no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you the deal if I walk out of this room. And it was great and it worked, right? But then now, the AI automation side of things, I think I went like a little too far in the opposite direction where I was like, hey, don't sweat it. It's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of this. Here's a proposal and you can get back to me in a year. But I definitely resonate with what you're saying, right? Like if you approach 100 leads or something, or let's say 100 people say yes to your thing and want to do a call, like 30 of them will just be like, hey, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. Like this is exactly what I need. And it just so happens to cross my desk at exactly this right time. So let's do it. Assuming you're pricing appropriately and you're an okay salesperson.
Yeah.
Like another 30% of them are kind of like, screw you. I'm never ever doing this. And it's pathetic that you would even reach out to me. So go die. And then there's like that like middle 30 or 40%. And like, that's really like what we're talking about here. Like that's really what you can move and play with. I would much rather speak to the needs of that first 30%, the people that say yes, and like try and give them the best experience humanly possible, than try and work my way, pushing people that are no's or pushing people that are kind of in the middle towards me, if that makes sense. Because you can just solve it through volume, right?
And I think that a lot of people starting out, and I know that I did, overestimate how much you really need to like start getting some decent financial success. Like you can get 5 or 6 clients and be looking pretty good if you have a few of them on recurring and a few of them as like 1 or 2 off jobs. Like that's enough to keep that engine and that cycle kind of running. And so you don't need to be worrying too much about like I'd almost prefer to deal with the people who are like, go kill yourself.
Yeah, true. It's either like a hell yes or a hell no, right? Dude, I remember back in the days when like, and actually I came up on the little note that I wrote in a journal app forever ago. My goal is $2,000 per month. In order to get there, I will need to sell 8 $250 a month packages. I was like, no, you actually,
that's awesome.
It's like one client. You know what I mean? Like it's like a half a client. Like you don't need to, Anyway, there's also that overestimation flipped. So there's an underestimation of the amount of volume, to be clear, that you need to do in order to get a client. And then there's like an overestimation, like the number of clients that you need in order to like see results. It's very odd. Do you have any like crazy client stories that you'd like to share with the class? That'd be interesting. Everybody's always got at least one.
So to be honest, I think that I had one that was like not great. I don't have any like super crazy ones. I think after this one, I was like semi unfortunate. Like I became a little bit more selective and I can be selective because of the part-time aspect of my business model. But she started off fine. Like the client started off fine and they seemed excited. And then they just became like really hard to communicate, like would not respond to like any of my Loom updates. She referred me to her husband, who was like had a recruitment firm or something like that. And kind of made it seem like was like really, really excited about, what I was doing. And then they kind of strung me along for a while, and then she just stopped paying me. Like we had like a recurring monthly and like would come into Slack and like pretend like this wasn't happening, like that they weren't just not paying me. And I kept like saying like, I'm not going to do any work. And then at the end, they ended up like just shutting down their whole business, shut down her whole Upwork account. And then like a couple weeks later, I saw that like she had like opened up for a new Upwork account with like a new business name, asking for the same thing. And
Oh,
I should have known though, because like I looked at like looking back, like there were some reviews on like the Upwork that were like, this person is trying to like pay me, 100. And the thing is like the job that was doing, it was probably like $400 total. And it was just like the increments of $100. And I was just like, what are we doing?
like the amount of time in order to orchestrate that elaborate fraud is way more than if you just done
It
some
was,
work and
yeah,
made the $400. Dude, that's brutal.
yeah,
There's definitely some
yeah.
freaking cookie cutter nickel and dime style clients on the platform. When you
What
were
was one of your craziest?
my craziest, I had somebody threaten to sue me for taking, not taking, but I built them like a cold email system. And they had this revolutionary, amazing idea that we would use AI to personalize the icebreakers of the emails. And I was like, yes, that's the
Sure
system.
you
That's what I'm
did.
doing. And then he found me selling that system later, and then threatened to sue me for it, saying that I was stealing his genius idea that he was going to take to market and make $1 million. So I ended up refunding him completely. I was like, I want nothing to do with you. Like, just take your freaking
That's
money and run.
hilarious.
But he was a thorn in my side for quite a while. Yeah, I can't blame him. Like,
Yeah,
it does seem very revolutionary to people that don't understand it. We're in the market, so it's like we use AI to personalize
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, um, yeah, man, that's cool. So, okay, let's just talk a little bit about that goal. And so, 500 grand a month, 500 grand a year. So, let's say you're, I don't know, hypothetically averaging, let's just say $15,000 a month with this. That's about 200K. Probably got a full time job. You don't have to tell me how much money you're making, but presumably that makes up another chunk. How are you going to get to 500K a year? Like, do you have any additional things that you're planning on doing? Are you going to keep on scaling the agency? Like, what's the plan?
It's a good question. I think I'm at a place where like my client load is good. I'm kind of acclimating to the new role. Um, I do have kind of other irons in the fire. I'm working on a SaaS development project within kind of the automation space as well. But I would say that like where I'm at right now is kind of like good. I'm feeling it out. And because it is a lot of work, and it is something that I don't know that I would be able to. I think I'm at the threshold of my
Mm,
time, and like, you know, it is kind of, I could, but it's at a point where I don't know if I should at the moment, just time wise. I am exploring uh a new area of offer that I think is compelling, and that's community development in terms of like helping people automate communities. I think that this is kind of in my mind like the natural progression for um, lead generation.
mm,
I think that cold email, and maybe it's because of my bias towards cold email, but I think cold email is not going to exist as it is forever. I know that you say that, and how that's going to change or when that's going to change, I don't know. But I think that people are gravitating towards uh, um, community in general, and I think that it would be a cool offer to be like, hey, I'll get you, a Discord community or a subreddit, and it'll come with 1,000 people, and then will automate your follow up for onboarding people in the community. Follow up like weekly posts or whatever. I think
mm.
it's an interesting area, and so I'm gonna explore that. I think that that's something that resonates with me a little bit more because I think it is a little bit more genuine of a value add to just the industry in general because it includes like a actual relationships rather than just like I'm spamming people with
Right.
lots of emails. Um, so I think there I would like my SaaS project to kind of also be a supplement to the financial goal.
What's the idea
But we'll see.
with the SaaS? Run me through it.
Yeah, so the SaaS we've been working on it for the past year. So it is called Abacus, and so It's a tool that lets users instantly project ROI for cross-platform AI automation and essentially turns a use case into a shareable ROI report that consultants can put in a proposal. And so the idea is that we're making a
Interesting.
bet that ROI visibility is going to become more and more important as the field advances. And we think that people need something a little bit more than just an ROI calculator in Excel.
Mhm.
And so we want this platform to be a place where businesses and consultants can explore and understand and act on ROI for automation. Um, and I think that there's a lot of nuance once you start getting into that like area between, well, definitely an enterprise level, but even like the medium to enterprise level. I think that there's a lot of nuance in how to project ROI. So things like different tasks are going to be more revenue touching,
Yeah.
so they should have a higher weight. Leverage model modifier where it's like how many people does this automation system benefit per run? Opportunity costs, like does this unlock work for you that you couldn't have done before? Um, you know, Things like leakage, like not every hour that you save is going to be put towards, something productive.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so there's a lot of aspects to ROI that I think that should be explored. And so right now we're kind of focusing on just the ROI report, but eventually we would like to be a platform that is kind of ROI observability.
Dude,
Um,
that's really cool because I imagine this is, you probably built some of this out as like an internal tool just to like help you model your own clients' ROIs.
yeah,
Now you're like, well, this had value to me. I bet you I could sell it to other people. What's
yeah.
what's like the monetization scheme that you're going for? Is this going to be like low touch? Is it going to be like high touch? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, so as of right now, like it really will depend on like what I think like the community gets out of it. And when I say community, I mean like whether it's people in your community or just in the automation community in general. We would like to see, like affiliate monetization. So it's like if someone comes into this platform and they enter a use case, we can like optimize, be like, hey, there's another tool that does this same thing, but for cheaper. Or, a business owner comes in and they don't have an account on, N8N. Like we recommend N8N or Zapier or whatever, and
Cool.
they can.
Yeah, that's sweet.
But eventually there probably is going to be an aspect of like premium where it's like if you want to monitor your token usage on your LLMs via this, or if you want to, you know, use our AI assistant, of course. I think right now though our primary focus is usage data because I think that our projection model is going to get better as we get users, and that to me is more important right now than monetization.
Yeah,
It's
for
just to
sure.
get people on there and making our projection model just better.
Yeah, make that product as great as possible. That's sweet, man. Seems
Yeah.
like a very natural conclusion to somebody that has your experience working with enterprise and now with SMB. Throw you some hot, quick questions. If you had to start over from scratch tomorrow with what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I would have started cold email faster.
Hey, there we go. Cold
Yeah,
email W.
I would have started cold email faster, and I would have just focused on selling. I think I spent too much time like trying to be like, which platform do I use? Do I use Zapier? Do I use Make? Do I, which automations should I learn? And I realized pretty quickly that I learned the most on the job, and to take those jobs that are just above my skill level. I know you're a big proponent of that, of like put yourself in uncomfortable situations,
Mhm.
and that's just the truth. It's like you learn when you're kind of forced to, or at least I do. But I think that was, I would say that the school community, hands down, my number one benefit from your school community was having other people in there. It's
Mm.
when you're doing something on your own, you don't have a boss to be like, hey, this is how you do it. This is how you troubleshoot this. And having that safety net of like, I don't know how to fix this node, or I don't know how to, do this use case. And having a ton of people to be like, yeah, this is how you do it was so important for having any sort of success, or just having that confidence to like put yourself out there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to hear you say that because that was a big chunk of the reason why I put Maker School together. I remember back when I was starting all this stuff and going door to door, like I would have killed to just know that there was anybody else doing what I was doing because I just felt like I was blazing a completely new path. And in a way, I think I was because I didn't know any of that. But just like, we are consensus creatures, right? Like If the average of a group is higher than you are, then you will naturally gravitate towards the average of that group. And, I think we've assembled a pretty damn cool high average that includes
Yeah,
performers like yourself.
it's honestly like pretty crazy, and like there are, because I've been doing a decent amount of networking calls or just kind of just connecting coffee chats, and one day it'll be like someone ex Fang, and the next day it'll be someone who, like 16-year-old who's just like super ambitious, and then the next day it'll be like somebody who's 30 years in back end dev. It's like it's pretty awesome to see the wide range of experience, and um, just there's just a ton of experience that you can get
For
there.
sure. I completely understand why you're doubling down on the community model. I think I would agree with you. The way that I always see these things is it's like social media, but it's like a group of people on social media that are like suffering from your exact same problem, that like have access to a bunch of the exact same resource. I mean, I could sit here and talk about how great my community is all day, so I'm not going to. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's just like hyper social media. So it's like social media was sold to us as the premise of it being like, connects us and like makes us better and blah, blah. And it just turned into like algorithmic slop garbage where we're just like hooked on, dopamine reels. I feel like this is like social media, but it's like the positive career improving premise.
Yeah, yeah,
And I totally resonate with your idea of tackling that with an offer. So keep me in the loop, dude. Would be great to hear. And
yeah.
congrats
Absolutely.
again on the massive
Thank you.
milestone.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that part-time case
I
study part
appreciate
is
it.
huge for a lot of people in the group that are like juggling
Yeah,
full-time
yeah.
jobs and stuff.
And one last thing that I will tell people who are out there, listening about the part-time thing is that like use your job as your superpower. It's like that is how, like not having to have that urgency to like put food on the table is going to be part of the process of getting success if you want to do it part-time. But also understand that the business model for part-time is going to be very different than scaling something if you're going all in. But I think that part of the reason that most of us get into this consulting beyond just the money is that the idea of like having freedom to do things the way that you want to do it. And so I highly encourage people to really reflect on like what is important to them in terms of, is growth important? Is like just going purely, financial milestones like important to you, or is like the freedom aspect? And so it's like I always recommend people to take my advice for a grain of salt, with a grain of salt, take other people's advice with a grain of salt, and do what works for them. Like, Nick may say like, hey, we should only do solo, not that you're saying that, but you should only be solo freelancer and never outsource. And then I may say like, hey, it's okay to outsource. It's up to you. Like that's the whole reason why we do this. Like don't constrain yourself to one way of doing things because you think that that's the only way that is available.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole definition of being an entrepreneur, right? Figuring it out. So you can build whatever you want into your own business. And that's why business is so amazing. Well said,
Yeah.
Jake. All right, my brother. Thank you very much for coming on. Looking
Thank
forward
you,
to the
man.
next time we chat.
Yeah. Take care, man.
Cheers.